Welcome to another edition of What Lies Ahead podcast, where I explore everything related to the hardcore scene and community. I'm your host, Chris Raffini, and today's special guest is Christian Mcknight. Christian has been an integral part of the Long Island hardcore scene for nearly 30 years, beginning by making a huge impact with Feet First Productions, where he books shows at various different venues across the island and in the city. He is now a promoter, setting up shows across the entire New York area and out of state by continuing to shape the local music landscape. Last year, Christian's band Cleanser reunited for a highly anticipated show at Brooklyn as well, which we'll absolutely get into. I'm excited for him to be on the show to discuss his history, work in the music industry, and of course, the return of Cleanser. Christian, welcome.
Hello, what's up?
What's up,
Hello.
man?
Woo.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. And bear with me as this is obviously my fourth episode here, but known you for a long time. I'm going to say mid 90s we met, give or
Yeah,
take.
definitely.
Maybe
Yeah.
get TWAC. And what I will say is you were always someone who was so supportive and helpful with giving bands, hooking up bands with shows, but also setting up the biggest shows on the island. It was a constant thing. You clearly loved it. So we're going to start a little bit with where that started, but then end off where you are now as a promoter in terms of obviously
Sure.
that love and passion has been a career for you. And still to this day, when I see you at shows and when we talk, you still have that same passion for it, which is amazing. So talk about what led you into the hardcore scene. We'll start with that. And the first show you went to that changed everything, where you're like, okay, this is going to be my weekends for the rest of my life.
Right. What's funny? I think everybody has that moment where, like you ask somebody, you're like, where were you when you ask your parents, like, where were you when you heard that JFK died? Or where were you when you heard Michael Jackson died? Or all these like specific events. And I think when you ask a hardcore kid, like, what was the minute you knew you were hooked, right? And I think everybody has like their show. So when I was a kid, I just always loved music. My thought was that I was going to be in a band, I was going to be famous, all that bullshit that comes along with it. I grew up a massive metalhead, but I also had a very big hip hop influence from friends I grew up with, like reggae too, because of some friends I grew up with. And I always had like an eclectic palette for music, and I didn't just kind of like put myself in one, spot. I mean, I even owned a pair of Cavaricis because, freestyle was kind of cool, right? In the late 80s.
Mhm.
So I always liked all of it. I mean, I would go to the teen clubs, as funny as that sounds, and like, dance to TKO and the Cover Girls and all that bullshit because like I just liked music related events, and I literally like as a teenager would take my girlfriend to see Paula Abdul, or I would go, later. So the Spice Girls, like I just really liked live music. So, I was probably like when I was like 12 or 13, I was at a jungle gym near my house. I liked Anthrax and they had the NYHC logo on one of their shirts. So I wrote it on a jungle gym, and one of my neighbors, Brian O'Connell, was like, "You know what that means?" And I was like, "It's on an Anthrax shirt." And he like very politely schooled me, and he could have been a dick, but he was not. And then a couple of days later, maybe at some point, he stopped by my house with like a treasure trove of tapes from anything from like Bold, Crucial Youth, The Misfits, Dead Kennedys, um just a lot of shit, and a blast. It was a blast him there. It just had like, this just amazing array of like, shit. Cause this must have been like 89 or 1990. And, I kind of like put it on the shelf, but knew it existed. And then, when I was 16-ish, my friends all started to get into hardcore. Josh Swank, who was the first bassist of Cleanser, was the first one that really got into hardcore. And we all, me, him, and my friend Chris, who eventually was the singer of Chimichanga, Scott Van from Long Island, went to see Fear at CBGB's, and Sheer Terror opened up.
Oh,
And that summer, like, so he, so at the time, the angle was fully going on. That was a really important place for Long Island. I went there a couple of times. I saw some bands there. And then, the first thing that like really made an impact was the summer when I was like, going into senior year. Me and Josh Schwank drove in his whatever car to go see Scape Grace at a warehouse in Bohemia that Artie Philly had booked. And I had kind of like had acquaintances in the scene, but seeing Scape Grace play was just like in a dark warehouse with some shitty lights. And I remember like Artie, then Philly, now White, was just dancing the whole time and moshing and like just repetitive dance, but he was like, just kind of tough looking it. And I
Mm.
was like, this is sick, like, and then, yeah. And then me and Josh got stuck there that night because the car broke down. I forgot how eventually we got home. We had to call a system from a payphone. There was some like secret code to the car that had a security system, whatever. So then, like, that was when I was like, I started to talk to people, and that was, and in that same time frame, I met the players. I met both Arties. I met George Reynolds. I met George Fullen, General George. I
Mm.
met Tommy Corrigan. And I started to, I met Neil. I met Dubin. I met all the people that were like important in that scene because, eventually I met Derek. I was a big Neglect fan. That was one of the first hardcore bands that I heard. And so, I just kind of stayed a little bit of friends with everybody. And yeah, that was it. And that was it, that show. And then that summer, I turned 18. I had some money from a malpractice case that I won, and me and Josh Swank leased a warehouse in Hempstead, called it the Underground Network, and that was the first shows that I booked. And that was
Wow. At
the summer
18.
of '94. Yeah. I mean, I kind of like had booked some shows here and there, like in my like town, and like helped out with some stuff. But that was like the first thing like that I really did. And that coincidentally, and that summer was nuts, right? Because 1994, Kurt Cobain dies. A
Yeah.
lot of these, like Earth Crisis and Snapcase and Strike, that whole scene all of a sudden is massive. All three of those bands actually played the UN, by the way. And then, yeah, like, and we had that warehouse for a summer, and that's the first shows that I ever booked. And the first actual show that I booked was like, it was VOD, Jody Crutch, and a bunch of other bands, and that was like the first hardcore show that I booked, and that
Wow.
was like that, that summer of like June of '94.
That's crazy. That's cool
Yeah,
too, So, but what made you? So you're obviously still at the time, right? When you're 17, 18, you feel. I remember I felt like I was, I knew everything at that point in time. And you're older than you think.
totally.
You're 18 years old, and that's a lot to put together a show. People see a flyer, people see ads for shows now, and they're like, "Oh, the show's together." But there's a lot of work in doing that.
Yeah,
You
of
went
course.
out, you got the venue, you did all that kind of stuff, the warehouse at least. So, what made you interested in doing that? Because you obviously were into the scene, into the culture, but
Sure.
what was interested in organizing? Because you have to be able to multitask. You have to organize. There's a whole bunch of things involved in putting together a show. And
Yeah, it was a really interesting time because like I said, I had some money from a malpractice case, and I was always very like entrepreneurial. My grandmother taught me the word entrepreneur when I was a kid, and I like was fascinated with that word and fascinated with this concept that you can kind of like create your own business, and then obviously hardcore is like made for that, right? Where you're industrious, you're entrepreneurial, you set up, people set up shows, they start zines, all that stuff. And and I, for me, like, being in a band was the most important thing, and eventually I did that. But you know I just thought this was a good idea to like,
Mhm.
which it was a terrible idea because I lost a shit ton of money. But and my mom, my dad were like, the fuck are you doing? But we had, I mean, it's crazy. Like when I look back at the shows that like, and it was the one summer of '94, like I said before, we had like Strife, Earth Crisis, Snapcase, Mouthpiece, Some Majority on one show. There was another show that happened there that was like Endpoint and Shift. Like I said, VOD was the first show. We did a Yuppie Side Diamond 16 show. One Away played there. I mean, like, and Artie White obviously helped too, because you couldn't do a show on Long Island of that size at the time and not have him, kind of involved just because he was doing the best shit. So,
Mhm.
we were able to like pull off some pretty crazy things, but that's when I got like my itch, right? And then yeah, and then I wanted to be in a band, and then I kind of
Mhm.
forgot about booking shows for a little bit.
While Cleanser was going on, because I'm thinking, I was like, I started going late 94, 95.
Sure,
And I remember hearing you guys on the Long Island hardcore comp on None of the Above.
sure.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. So you were obviously Cleanser was full steam ahead at that point in time.
Yeah.
Still booking here and there. It sounds like a here and there, but Cleanser
Yeah, so
sounds like it
what kind of happened? What was interesting? So the UN shuts down, and then one day I'm in the flea market near my house, Shoppers Village in West Hempstead, that I used to go to all the time. And this guy that I know really well, Brian, who's sadly passed away since,
Mm,
but he owned the like t-shirt shop in Shoppers Village, and was like, Shoppers Village was closing. I'm gonna open up a record store, and since I still had a couple of the monies from, the malpractice case, I was just like, yo, let's open up a record store. So when I was 19, I opened up a record store with this guy Brian. It was called Halo Zero. He came up with the name. He was a really fucking brilliant guy. It's really sad that he's not with us anymore, but like,
mm.
it's his idea to like set up the store. So we had the store that was like, he was a goth industrial dude, I was a hardcore dude. So we set that store up, which is on Hempstead Turnpike in West Hempstead, coincidentally across the street from what later became the Witch's Brew.
Oh, okay.
And then yeah, and then but so that's like, so the reason why that's relevant is because that's kind of like where Cleanser formed, because I would have shows in the record store and whatever. And then I remember, like, Josh Schwank, like, like I said, we were in bands together when we were kids. And then, we knew Derek, we hung out with Derek, and then I would like really want to be in a band. And then Neglect broke up. We convinced him to do it. We, at first, Justin Beck was gonna play drums because I was like really good friends with Glassjaw even back then. They
Mhm.
played their second show at my house. And then he didn't do it. We asked Gary Bennett. He was gonna do it. Then eventually he went on, to form Killer Idols. So the first lineup of Cleanser was Pete, the drummer of Yuppie Side, Mike Daffner, who was the singer of Car Bomb and was also like the singer of Neck, and Josh Schwank, and of course Derek Schelling from Neglect. And
Um,
yeah, that was like 95. And I thought that because we had this like ex-member band, we were going to be the biggest band in the world. And then that didn't happen. And then, yeah, at some point I started booking shows again.
You guys, I remember seeing you at the PWAC, and we played with you at Deja One a bunch of times too. I
Course, yeah.
remember, and but yeah, you guys got out there. You played. You put two full lengths out, right? From what I recall,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff, right?
yep.
You be able to play. Did you go over to Europe at any
Yeah,
point? Yeah,
yeah, we
yeah.
did,
So
yeah.
yeah,
We
it's pretty.
actually we broke up in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we broke up in Europe.
Now, did you guys see that coming, or it just was like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
we're
Yeah,
playing
there
in
was some
Europe, but
there
things
there was some
happen.
there's some really difficult personalities in Cleanser, which they're still unfortunately very difficult personalities, which is why Cleanser reunions don't happen often, and when they do, if you know, you'll notice who's on stage and who's not.
Mhm.
So it's unfortunate, but um I quickly figured out, like, when that band was gonna break up, that you know I'm not a singer. Like, as much as I want to be, like, as much as I love screaming, like, I'm not as good as you or some other people. And like, I tried to do the sing thing. And what's really crazy was that, like, literally right before Cleanser recorded their first demo, like, I broke my nose with the right track in, and I my nose totally, like, my voice changed. And I still, whatever.
Wow, from that. Wow.
Yeah, and I think some of the
Yeah.
Cleanser stuff, like, I hear and I'm like, oh, this is okay, but I was never happy with the way that I sounded. I always got a lot of shit for the way that I sounded. I think the band kind of felt that they might have been bigger if they had a different singer. And, like, so it just kind of made sense that we were going to break up. And even though, like, in my mind, I wanted to be in another band, I kind of knew that wasn't my path. And I was just going to, continue down the behind the scenes road and
Behind the scenes
figure
road.
that out.
But I think,
Yeah.
before, get back into the booking piece of it, you put you guys on now, it could be out now. I think what you
Thank you.
guys were doing at that time was ahead of its time a little bit, to be quite honest, within the scene.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it was, I know for you to say that, it's like your band and stuff, but I think things that you were doing were that. I thought the music was intricate, it was heavy, there was melodic, it had a lot of different things going on. And I think that's why be cool to see you back at some point in time again here.
Well, I mean, listen, the truth is, you got to give that credit to Derek. Derek is
Mhm.
like, a genius. Like there's no coincidence that like if you say that about Cleanser, but also listen to Neglect, like it's just he's the thread, right? Because he's just such an insanely good guitarist, creative, and just like has so many ideas, and he can write songs like in seconds. So because of that, I think that that's like what really made Cleanser stand out. And I think that's and it's amazing how like I do get hit up by kids now that are like, I've never heard your band. This is like
Hmm.
crazy. Like, I can't believe it sounds like this. So I gotta give credit where credit's due. I think that like, and everybody in the band, like Keith Moore is an incredible drummer. Dave Case is now in Helmet, like Ted Buklos, who's like, so everybody like, and me who, like I said, never liked my voice, but but I'm in a band with these incredible musicians. So I mean, listen, it's a testament, I think, to them, and and it's cool that we were a part of that scene. Whether or not I want to argue with how good I was or how bad I was or anything about the band, like we were like definitely we come up in that conversation of like
Yeah.
the late '90s Long Island hardcore bands. So like I am pretty proud of that.
Absolutely. And when I think of late '90s, and obviously some of these questions here about that, I put you guys in that category up for sure for in
Thank
Long
you.
Island, especially. So you go back to booking, right? Was that is it 98?
Well, kind of go back to booking, but also like
98?
right, yeah, like right
Yeah,
before, yeah, that was '98. So like right before that, I put out the Glassjar record, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I convinced
that's
them to
right.
let me put it out. So at the time, I was, yeah, so I was like, all right, you know what? Like, I'm not gonna get a day job. That's not my vibe. So I'm gonna book shows. I'm gonna also put out this Glassjar record. I like some other bands. There's a ska band, Close Call, that I liked. I was gonna put out their record that never happened. So yeah, so probably in the late '90s, I was put out the record, but also I was booking shows like here and there. Like I remember I booked a couple of shows at some spots at Island Park, but
The
um
industry?
yeah, no, not industry. What the fuck's that place called? I can't remember it. I booked a Wonking Down show there. I tried out for Wonking Down, and I was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, man, I couldn't. I'm no Rob, I couldn't do that shit. But yeah. So then, like, I did a show for them, and that's when I started like doing shows again. But then I joined up with like the Mark Noise Collective at Deja One, which at the time was me, our boy Race, Anthony Castoro, who
Yeah.
has been my fucking rock since then.
Mhm.
Uh Rich Hall, Mark Noise, Ryan Paganos, who works now for Marvel, and this kid Pat, and that was like our crew that did the shows at Deja One.
I'm going to get into Deja because selfishly, my best memories of a band are at that place, just for going to shows, playing shows. But you mentioned somebody. Let's take
Yeah,
a step back for a sec. So, Rich Hall, I
yeah,
mean, where the time where this is basically almost February of 2025. We got the horrible news a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago regarding him. So, you wrote something really nice about him on Facebook. I know you had an amazing relationship with him, and
yeah.
I've interviewed a few people this podcast because we're getting started out with it, and it's just amazing how this guy has impacted the people's lives that are involved in it. So I didn't, knew of him. I wasn't as close clearly as you
Sure.
were and some of the other people. But why don't you talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, he was somebody that I knew since going to shows in the in the early to mid '90s, because I know he like, I believe he used to help Tyler King with stuff.
Mhm.
And, Tyler, was somebody that I would never admit this back then, but I idolized because Tyler did the fucking coolest shit. Like Tyler booked these fucking awesome shows at CBGB's
Yeah.
and he booked these awesome shows to PWAC, and like he really just like was fucking cool and just did all this cool shit. And so like I knew Rich from him. And then, I really got to, and obviously when you're growing up going to shows, there's a million people that as acquaintances and you see and you bullshit, and I always liked, I liked him. I knew that at the time too, I was pretty, friendly with Justin Skirty, who, was in Figurehead. I knew he was friends with Rich. So I definitely became better friends with Rich during the Deja One days when we had this like collective and there was all of us working on these shows. And Mark Noyes really did this amazing thing by like putting this collective of like kids together. And, you know, it, it's so shitty what happened with Rich because he's a living, breathing person, and like
Mm,
outside of all of the amazing things you can say about him, he had a family and, it's just really scary how one day the dude was here and the next day he wasn't. But I'll tell you, like, that dude always knew of the cooler bands before anybody else. He was friends with the cool bands before anybody else. He brought some amazing fucking bands to Long Island, whether it was Cave In, Piebald, Botch. He was on that shit way before any of
yeah,
us. ISIS, all these bands. And, I remember obviously I was pretty jealous of him when he was like doing CB shows. Cause for a minute I did some CB shows, probably like the late 90s. Late 90s, early 2000s. I probably booked maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 shows there, but he really like fell into that role and just crushed it. I mean, he
mm,
did these like amazing, legendary, talked about hardcore shows there. And I will bet money that like he probably booked a lot of people's first shows. He booked a lot of people's favorite shows. He booked a lot of bands that went on to become people's favorite bands. And he just, was just like jack of all trades because he was an artist. He would make his flyers and it's just fucking devastating.
yeah.
It's just like as time goes on and we lose more and more people from our scene, it never gets easier when somebody passes away. It never gets any less shocking. And that one was just like
Yeah,
absolutely
out of nowhere.
heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and and like you said, man, the biggest piece of it's right. It's prayers and condolences to his wife and kid. That's
terrible.
it's terrible, man. It's terrible. But we were missed, not to bring him up, because he was a
How
figure
do I
right in
not?
Long
Yeah.
Island. Yeah,
Yeah. And
Long
like,
Island
and
City. I
like,
mean, everywhere.
and it's crazy because, when he went to the city, I was still mostly like when he started booking the CB shows, I was still booking Long Island shows, and every once in a while we'd work on something together. But like, I remember having a couple conversations with him when I started booking Irving and some of the bigger shows, and he was just like, man, I remember him saying to me once, one of the last times I saw him, he was like, yo, it's so fucking cool you get to do these shows. And I remember thinking like that's crazy that you said that to me
Mm.
because it's like this dude, used to book the sickest shows at CB's. He helped with Hellfest. Like he did all this crazy shit. So it's yeah, it's terrible. It's really
Yeah,
sad.
yeah, man, it's sad, and realize that obviously he's part of Deja One, which we were talking about. Like I said, that to me was this, I just PWAC I think of, but just for me, late '90s, I really think of
Sure.
Deja One a lot. I really do because I felt like I was there every Friday and Saturday night. There was some random Sunday shows, but I just remember every Friday, Saturday night being there, and the shows getting put together. And there was just always stuff coming. There was always touring bands coming, and it was a big place. It was a catering hall, but it was big. I mean, the
Yeah.
place. I remember the Sick of It All show there.
Yeah, it
That
was amazing. Yeah.
it was like 1,500 people in there. It was
I
incredible.
mean, you want to hear something crazy? Guess how many people Deja One held?
I thought it could hold 1,000. Am I way off? I'm so bad. My band makes fun of me all the time. Is it 1,000?
It's 400.
See, I'm terrible. I'm
The
terrible.
PWAC you could fit like Jesus
Oh,
Christ. I can't even imagine how like
let me ask you,
yeah.
what do you think that VOD, well, there was a bunch of them, that VOD Mad Bull show? How many kids do you think were in that was nuts.
That's a myth. You got to have Artie White on your show one day to talk about
Uh-huh.
it. I don't know. I got to I my guesstimate is there was 2,000 people
At
there.
least,
I
right?
have to
I
seem
mean, that
like
was so packed. But so Deja One,
that was our Woodstock, man. Like, there's certain shows I've done a couple of cool interviews like for books and different things that talk about the scene and I do a lot of shit talking about the emo scene since I was kind of like so, involved in that. But like as far as hardcore goes, man, that was the fucking Woodstock. Like that show was insane. Like
nuts.
nuts. Like absolutely fucking nuts. Like how
Glassjaw
many
played
people
that
that were
too, right?
there?
Glassjaw
Yeah.
opened that. They opened that. Was Warped
Yeah.
Weeble was on that too?
Yeah, that was our last show.
Yeah, yes. And they're coming back in a
Yeah.
month or so. It'll be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that show I remember was insane. But Deja One, yeah, I'm always so bad with how many people I think can fit in. The old AMH, I thought 400 people could fit in there, which is literally you cannot do that before
Well,
they
you
knock
know what?
the road down.
So to be honest, like again, I definitely thought what Tyler King and Artie White were doing at Deja, I was super impressed, right? Because those guys had like they fucking had like Cannibal Corpse play there, Clutch played there,
The Down
Orange Nine
played there,
Millimeter played
remember?
there.
Right?
Yeah,
Did you
Down
do
played
that
there,
show?
but no, 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 I didn't do that. I didn't really.
That was
The
before
only
they were
my
anybody, but still, they played Deja
yeah,
One.
my only like real involvement with Deja. I'm sorry, my only real involvement with the PWAC was that I had a record store in the back that I did. I took the inventory from that record store that I had that I did with Brett from None of the
I
Above
remember that.
Records. And so I was like, I would go to their meetings, but that's, I mean, Artie and Tyler at the time were
It
like
was
kings,
their
and
their thing.
yeah, Michelle Lago helped too, who
Yes.
eventually I wound up doing some shows with, who definitely should be talked about because she booked a lot of great shows back in the day. So
Oh yeah.
so yeah, like I said, I really was enamored by what these guys were doing at the PWAC. So when I started doing shows at Deja, like real shows, and went from being kind of collective, and then I kind of, me and Race kind of did a lot of the shows. And to be honest, like that's when I really kind of played with the concepts of like we should get bigger bands. We should get the Earth Crises, the Snap Cases, and at that point, like those bands had booking agents. And I was actually like calling booking agents on the phone and saying, like, hey, we have this like scene here. And that for me was like really when like things had changed, when I stopped just being somebody who did like local shows and had the itch to kind of like push the envelope.
Right.
Um, and even, at the time, we were also at, Ground Zero was going on, and there was this guy named Eric that I don't fucking talk to, and I wish I did. But Eric was one of the owners of Ground Zero, and he was just like really like just taught me about the music industry. And at the time, I was just like, well, I'm not in it to make money. And that was the other crazy thing too. I used to lose money all the time,
Mhm.
but really taught me about the industry, like, taught me, and like, like about record companies and sales and all that shit, which I didn't understand. So, but even like, when you think back about it, like, like at Ground Zero, there was insane shows at Ground Zero too.
We had
Like,
some good
y-
ones there. I've been to some good ones there. It was awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, we did.
the Atari,
Yeah, it was
The Ataris played there, like, obviously Adam and his package, like, dude, I mean, man, if you grew up in Long Island in the late 90s and you went to shows, you saw some amazing shows. Like it's just, like Dubin or whoever booked the Get Up Kids at that place, like that was their Hofstra, Dubin booking at the drive-in at
yeah.
like at the Garden City bowling alley. Like just, crazy shit that like
You
that
won't see
people talk
now
about.
ever again. I feel like.
Well,
I mean, ever again,
I'll
but
never I'll never say you don't see now because I think that Scanlon does
he's
a
great.
fucking great
I mean, in
job.
like those venues, like bowling alleys and stuff.
Right, yeah, that
Yeah,
kind of shit.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we
That's what I meant. They,
unfortunately for Scanlon, we burned all those bridges. So by the time him and Jake Zimmerman and Charlie and some of these other dudes started booking shows, we really kind of like burned the bridge. Like because every VFW hall shows we ran through, no VFW hall wanted to do shows. I can't believe Massapequa still does it. Bowling alleys and bars and you name it, man. Like we just did shows everywhere. And eventually they were like, there's no bar. Something's gonna get broke. Some kid's gonna break his nose. And like, and there's a million people there and you got to pay the band. So like people just they get over it quick. So that's why it
yeah,
was really difficult to like actually keep a place to do shows at for more than a few years.
yeah, for sure. It has to have to be. It has to be. And that's cool too. We talked about because I do want to. You mentioned Scanlon, Miles to Go, which are killing it, honestly,
Killing it.
right now.
Yeah.
Which will, I want to get into that in a little bit. But where we're at now in that kind of time frame in the late '90s, what was your most memorable show? I mean, and there's going to be. It's probably hard, but at that time that you put together, uh, and you could name there's a couple, but like a Deja One, and there's some other places too, Long Island Zoo.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the Long Island Zoo, like, well, I'll say Deja One, like a couple ones. Ground Zero, the Atari Salt Majority show that got shut down that's like the highlight from there because
yeah.
that was just like a turning point of like the Atari
Crazy
signed to a
lineup.
major
I
label,
mean, look at that lineup.
right? And the Atari signed to a major label at the time. Salt Majority like held their own and drew just as many people, so that was good. All of the Deja ones. I mean, I remember like booking Leeway at which unfortunately another person Eddie
Another one,
passed
right?
away in
I
the
know.
past year, and and for me like in retrospect, being able to do shows for people that have now passed away is super important, right? When you get to say like, because that person passed away, like their career lasted this long and I was able to do a show for them, you know, a
Yeah.
few times. And that, I booked a Leeway show at CBGB's, which was probably one of the only real hardcore shows I did at CBGB's. And I'm like, that shit's like super important to me, like I'll take that forever. More important than any fucking show I do at the Garden or fucking, you
Right.
know, any big festivals. Like that shit really holds a place in my heart. But, so that was special. At the Long Island Zoo, there's a lot of great shows there. This guy Tom used to help. He was so fucking cool. Tom like had his family knew somebody that, you know, whatever, rented the show, let us do shows there. Rob used to do shows there too. It was just this Rob Henready. So we just had this cool collective. But the first show there that was fucking nuts that everyone talks about obviously was Newfound Glory. There was 2 nights in
Oh,
Newfound
good.
Glory,
I was there.
and I mean, Movie Life played one, Dashboard played another, and that was like right when Newfound Glory went from being like a touring scene band to like Warped Tour band.
What they, yeah,
And and
huge.
that those shows were just out of control because they just, they became a big band,
Yeah,
but they still
yeah.
played hardcore shows.
And that's what's cool. You go back in time a little bit and think of some of the shows that were put together then on the island and where these bands are now and what they become and the influence they have.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Remember you did, was it this island? Was it this island Earth Fest? Was it with Glassjaw and was it Bane?
Yeah, there was
Our
the
last
this island.
show that we played, that was a good one.
Yeah,
Vince, and you put that
yeah.
together.
I
And
remember what's funny. I remember with you guys though, always wanting to like. I remember I put you on like a Midtown show or because what was happening. I think what also should be talked about too is that like you know there was like a slow movement of the heavier bands started to write poppier songs, and or the people that was in a hardcore band was now in like a pop punk band or something that was like more of an emo band. And so like Newfound Glory is the best example of somebody who sang in a hardcore band, but then created this amazing pop punk band, and there was a whole scene around them, and those bands all came to Long Island, and and it was just this weird like their growing pains of where do I put Overthrow because they can draw a bunch of people, but most of the shows I'm booking now were like these drive through record or vagrant bands or J Tree, etc. So it was an interesting time where, and I remember like straight up putting like ska bands. Like I put Channel 59, which Dan Deacon is the fucking huge deal, Dan Deacon, but I put them on an H2O show, and people were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Why not? Like
yeah,
who cares?" Like,
I love that you did that, and that's some of the stuff that's going on today too. That's happening,
yeah,
mixed lineups, which is great. I do remember that quickly though. I remember calling you. I was living on campus at that point. I'm like, give us something we don't belong on. And I remember you saying to me, and you said it was Midtown. Was it Life? I forgot. It was Midtown. Someone else. And you're like, and you just started like, oh my god, you guys don't belong on this show, because it was just a completely contrast of styles, but you did it, and that was at I think the Long Island Zoo, which was cool.
well, that was no, that show was at the Battle on American Legion Hall.
Oh, okay. See,
Yeah. So
my mind is getting fuzzy with some of these spots.
oh
See,
no,
and that's
it's
why I know you're good with that. You have a good memory with those things. So okay.
straight edge forever, baby. That works. I think also too like Warped Tour and a lot of those type of festivals eventually when we did Bamboozle, those festivals really kind of helped with the like meshing, the amalgamation of the scenes, where you had your pop punk bands, your hardcore bands, your ska bands, your whatever else. And they always had like some connectivity, like some connective tissue. And I tried it on a smaller scale. Sometimes it worked really well. Sometimes people were like, what the fuck you doing? But you know what? Like I think that I think it was necessary for the time because like it was this thing that happened in like probably 2000, 2001, 2002, where especially here a lot of the bands just like I mean listen, you can't deny that like in the emo world we had the biggest fucking bands. We had
Oh
fucking
yeah,
Brand New, Take It Back Sunday, the Movie Life, all these like incredible fucking bands. And sorry to use the word emo. I'm sure everybody get yell at me for saying that, but whatever. It's a catch-all.
it
Um,
is. It is. But no, but you're absolutely right, especially on Long Island. For sure.
yeah. And again, I don't. give Race enough credit, Anthony Castora Race, because he's been with me forever. Now he's one of the best production managers in the business. Because at a point in time, we kind of, as the shows got bigger, it was important for us to assign roles, right? Where it was like,
Right.
I'm the talent buyer. Like I'm gonna book the show. I'm gonna work it out. Race is gonna be the production manager. Ryan Poker helped. Jessica from Modig did the door. Rich Rollins also did the door. Steve Mosh, another sadly person that died way
Yeah.
before his time. Like he helped. So it's like, eventually when the Feet First thing happened, and again, not to be confused with that other Feet First, because we did it first. I believe I was born Feet First. That's why I fucking called it Feet First. Um, I think they came a little bit later and they do a lot more production stuff. But when we started Feet First in the late 90s, it was just us kind of like falling into our roles, like everyone booked, but it just became like obvious that like somebody had to learn production, somebody learned how to do marketing, somebody had to like really know how to do the door, somebody really knew how to like pay the band correctly. So
Right.
that's when the entrepreneurial stuff and the business stuff kind of kicked in. We were like, yo, we have to do this the right way. And
Right.
that was hard. That was definitely hard for a lot of us. For me, it was.
Well, it sounds like a lot of it. It's like you were learning as you were going, and it sounds like everything as you were building with the different venues, the different places that you were booking shows. You're like, okay, look, we need this, we need that. This is how we'll take care of this. Dealing with booking agents when you're bringing in
Yeah, that was
Earthquakes and
crazy.
other bands, right?
Yeah, I mean, dealing with, it was so weird because I don't know, it's a taboo subject back then, but like basically people talked so much shit about me. And one of the reasons why I think people talked a lot of shit about me because they thought that I was like making a ton of money on shows. I swear to God, I was losing so much motherfucking money.
Mm,
It wasn't funny. And because of that, like you get a little protective, like for example, it's like, if you have $1,000 of your money on the line and then the show gets shut down because some kid kicks a fucking hole through the wall, you know, that sucks,
yeah,
and that's shitty. And I know that happens to every promoter and nobody likes to talk about that. But the reality is like when you're booking the show, it's your responsibility, right? And the person that owns the venue is going to hold you responsible. If somebody gets hurt and they sue somebody, they're going to sue you. So, as much as obviously we all love to mosh and go crazy, unfortunately, if you act in a certain way that causes the venue to get fucked up or causes somebody to get hurt, likely you're not going to get sued, but the person booking the show is going to get sued.
right.
And
And then
that's
you'll
the
have to,
hardest, right? And again, this is, 20 something years ago when I was doing hardcore shows. And that's the hardest pill to swallow, like
right. That's the reality.
that's,
And a club I wanted to bring up, or venue that was short lived, but I thought was a really cool spot was Swing Set.
yeah, of
And
course.
I remember when a show, either I was there or we played, because you had like a string of like 5 or 6 shows. I remember in that 99 2000 era there that were
They
that,
were huge. Yeah, there was
that
some
were
really
just
big, yeah,
were insane shows,
yeah.
and
That place fit 1,000 people. Yeah, that place.
that was it
Yeah,
felt like it, playing there
yeah.
and watching the shows. But I recall someone doing something to one of the bathrooms and stuff like that, and I just remember it's like come on, we're gonna lose this place now, So
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think that's one of the things, man. I'll probably get shit for saying this, but when I watch like videos now of like crowd killing, of like people like, and I don't think it really happens in Long Island like it does happen in other places, but like crowd killing where like people throwing garbage cans and people
yeah,
are intentionally like being targeted. I always think of the promoter when I see that shit, and I'm just like,
that's your
regardless.
lens, though, right?
Right,
So
but regardless of my opinion on that,
yeah,
whether or not people should be doing that, I'm thinking about the person that's going to be held liable. Like if somebody gets really hurt, and like every promoter has gotten sued. We all get sued. Like back then, we all got sued. Because it's like some young kid's gonna come for the first time. He's gonna leave with a broken nose. His dad's gonna get mad. His dad's gonna sue. Like, so it sucks. But that was a big part of it back then. Of
mhm.
of
At any
just
point, did
like
it make you feel like,
whatever.
is it should continue with this, or is just you had so much love for doing it, you didn't even think it was just all right, on to the next, promote another one,
There
or
was a lot of times that I dropped out, that I was like, I can't do this because I just thought that the liability was too high, the responsibility was too high. The financial responsibility, it's a lot, but you know, I couldn't, I always wanted to either manage bands, which I was very lucky that I managed a couple of bands in my life. I did radio for a little bit. You know, had been offered jobs at labels and I had been offered jobs, for booking agencies and different things, but I never really wanted to do any of that. And then, yeah, I just, would go through phases. And then when I didn't do shows, like Race or somebody else would like, kind of step it up and do shows in my place. And then, like all of a sudden this crazy fucking thing happened. And that is like these bands from our scene became big.
Mhm.
And, like and major labels started calling me and stuff. And I never in the beginning I was like really weird about it because I was like, this is our community, this is our scene. And obviously when you grow up a hardcore kid, you're totally like warned about major labels and selling out and like the irony of it is how many fucking bands eventually do sign to major labels, and that's kind of
Yeah,
like how I justified it because I was like, well, everyone eventually does, right? Like pretty much every band I could think of, signed to a major or a subsidiary of a major. So I felt less guilt about like decisions I made and people to work with. So yeah, I was like, let's do this. In like, the early 2000s when, our little shows turned into Take It Back Sunday at Sports Plus, drawing 2,000 people, brand new drawing 2,000 people. Like the eventual This on Earth that we did at that place, Country Fair Park, that drew 5,000 people. Like, it just turned into this thing that like, it just kept on growing,
going and growing.
I don't think anybody anticipated that, so then in probably like in 2001 I got a call from this dude in Jersey and he was like, yo, I hear you're doing these amazing shows. I'm gonna start a festival. I would love it if you could help me with the festival. And that was Skate and Surf, and Skate and Surf eventually became Bamboozle.
Right.
And then down the road, the company that I work for now bought Bamboozle, and 18 years later, I'm a professional promoter, and
Mhm.
like, and it's been a long, crazy trip, but that's kind of how I got here, and but I started with hardcore shows, and if it wasn't for the hardcore shows, like, or the scene related shows, I would never be doing what I am today, and I'm fucking lucky, man. I mean, like, you
You
know,
worked at it though. But you worked at it. You did, and you had passion for it, and I think that's the most important piece of it. And it's interesting too when you talk to anybody in the hardcore scene. It's it's just amazing how everybody says, no matter what they're doing and within their career, obviously, like with what you're doing,
sure,
was within it. But
yeah,
I could say with I do in my career, uh, it helped me with the confidence of where I'm at because of
sure.
being in a band, but being in the hardcore scene. Like I learned a lot, and I'm still learning from it. So to your point, I agree. I credit that because it to me leads you where you are today.
Yeah, it really does. I always say that like hardcore or the music scene in general is like being in college because it's on the job training.
Yeah,
You're booking a show, you're doing a fanzine, you're doing sound, you're promoting your band, you're whatever your role is, it's something that is not like a natural ability. You have to teach yourself, or somebody has to teach you. And it's incredible the amount of people that eventually go on to be like, like Brian Diaz, who I love, was the singer of Edna's Goldfish and, played bass. So he worked for Fall Out Boy for 15 years. Now he works for Blink. Ryan Poker, that was part of our crew. He's a full time, an amazing tech, like Sean Lobb, he's another guy that was part of our crew. He's a full time tech. Justin Skirty's a full time tech. Like, there's so many people I can think of that eventually find their way, but because of like a skill they learned from being in a hardcore band or working at a hardcore show.
yeah.
And that's the really impressive part of it, where it's like, I was having a conversation with some people yesterday and they were all talking about college and how much college costs and, and like their college journey. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I didn't do any of that shit. And I'm sitting at the table with you guys.
Yeah.
You know
I
what
mean,
I mean?
essentially what you did was like was in the late '90s on was real world. Let's call it internships. I mean, with
Sure.
what you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
doing, internships, but without actually, And you had, and going back to actually, if you say, like you mentioned, a lot of people, Rich Hall being one of them, I would
Yeah.
say in a way, mentors, right? Of people that you
Sure.
watch do
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a lot of people like, there was, Andrew Ellis, who is a big booking agent, called me when I was probably in my late, sorry, in the late 90s, and he really, for whatever reason, just took a liking to me, even though he yelled at me all the time, because I know he cared, and he showed, like, he really taught me how to book shows. He taught me how to take care of bands. He taught me how to settle contracts, all of that shit that I just didn't know. And again, like, you're really apprehensive to do anything too business like in the hardcore scene, because you're just taught that this is a scene and it's not
Right.
about the money, but there is a business side to it that you eventually have to learn. And that's something that, I did. And because of mentors, because because the people around me, like, I learned how to do a lot of the things that I probably would have never learned how to do.
Right. Couple more things, and then we'll end off with this little this and that thing that I do. But talking about the scene now,
Yeah,
and Long Island, we'll specifically talk about, and Scanlon, who I'm going to actually have on in a little bit, which I'm looking forward to talking
great.
to him, because he's him and his crew miles to go. I agree. We've kind of talked about this before, and I've
Yeah,
said this on podcast discussions I've had, when I've been on, and I think they're killing it right now. I
killing it. Yeah.
really do. That with the new AMH is amazing. Uh, and how do you see Long Island now in terms of as scene? Because it's gone through so many phases and it over the last 30 years or so, like any scene does. Uh, how do you see it now? And what the job, obviously, that the Scanlon and the
Sure.
crew of Miles to Go are doing?
So, when you grow up going to hardcore shows, you always listen to music that is older than you, right? Or like had been around before your time. So obviously when I got into hardcore, like, I was listening to stuff that was probably 5 to 10 years old. So then fast forward, right, to, like, I'm in a band and we're doing our reunion last year with all these other amazing Long Island hardcore bands, and all these kids that are moshing for us were likely not around, even alive, when we started. True story. And I think about how, like, hardcore's always been youth music, right? And Andy from Colorado says it all the time, that even though a lot of us are older because we've been around, it's really focused on the youth, and that's where it should be. And it's amazing how so many people just, like, kind of just picked up the reins and ran with it. Whether it's Jake Zimmerman, who, like, did shows for years and is now a really important person in the world of actually booking tours and heavier bands. He books Knock Loose, he books some fucking huge bands. And then eventually, like Scanlon took a lot of his business, and Scanlon, like, just does things I could never imagine doing. When I see, like, and he's just so confident and calm, and he doesn't get worked up, and I've obviously had a lot of behind the scenes conversations with him, and he's told me things that I would be jumping out the fucking window, but he just, is very chill, and he knows what he's doing, and he's like, it's a small group of us, that
Mhm.
that could relate to what it's like doing shows, and having the pressure to keep, I mean, I'll say this, like, Scanlon keeps a scene alive, essentially. You know what I
I
mean?
100%
Like,
agree.
it's a lot of pressure, and, like, he does an amazing job, and, obviously he books all the old hardcore bands, he books the new hardcore bands, like, he, like,
And by the
you
way,
know,
merges the bills. Like,
he does a good, I mean,
you
I've
see how
said this to
majority
him.
shows that are coming up, or like there's like it's standstills on, and then you have
Yeah.
movie life. It's just a nice blend. He does a really
He
good job.
knows this, so don't let it get to his head. But he definitely knows how to put good bills together, and
Oh, he does.
I say that to him all the time. I'm like,
He does.
that's his God given gift. Is that, like, he knows how to put some shit together. So, I think, and in general, like, I think it's amazing that there's a scene, and it's crazy every time I go to a fucking show and I see somebody I know, like, someone's like, oh yeah, my kid's in the pit, or like, my kid's friend's in the pit, and, like, but Antonio, my kid's in the pit. It's so nuts that we've got to that point that, like, a lot of our friends have teenagers, or even in some cases people in their kids in their early 20s, and they're in bands, and but I do love the fact that, like, there is a scene so self-sufficient right now that, like, even if none of our bands got back together, they could have shows for the next 10 years without any of our bands.
Right. You are.
Um,
And
you
there's
know,
like these
and
new crop of bands, new 5 to 8 years old that are.
yeah,
There's a kinship to them too. And what out of these newer band, like new, and I'm saying new, obviously, because we've been talking late '90s, early 2000s, but some of the newer bands, I would say the last say 5 to 8 years,
sure.
Long Island,
I
that you love.
mean, dude, you can't say enough good shit about Pain of Truth.
Good,
Like, it's
they're
it's
good.
so fucking nuts, man. That
Mhm.
like how the only way that I can describe Pain of Truth is they just get it. Like everything you need to do in a band on a live show, they just got it. It's insane. They're so poised, they're so tight. It's like literally like watching Slipknot or Hatebreed. Like every song is like precision. Like they just, I did a show. I was lucky enough to do a show last year at the Prudential Center with Day to Remember, and they were the first to
I was at
four.
that. I went to
Yeah,
that.
it was amazing, but I
Yeah.
was like, it was such a cool moment too. And I talked to them afterwards, and I was just like, this is so nuts. And Michael was like, dude, you booked the show. I didn't even know. But like, just see, like, watching them go from like playing AMH or a hardcore, and then, or the Meadows or whatever, and then watching them on an arena stage, they just, they owned it. They were
They
supposed
fit
to
it.
be there. They
Yeah.
fit it. So I mean, I again, obviously Koyo, brings that
Yeah.
like, that melodic Long Island sound. I think I like Last Laugh. I think God's Eyes is like up to something special. There's like, that indie rock band Oolong that I really like. There is obviously the Hangmans, the Regulates, the King
Mhm.
Nines, there's so many of those, but they all stand out. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they all have like their specific thing where it's like each one of them has something special. Like Regulate is, I was telling a friend recently, I was like, yo, you should check this band out. I think this kid, Seb, that sings for Regulate, like, there's something special about his voice and the way he sings. And I was like listening to it. I'm like, this doesn't sound like anything on Long Island. And,
Mhm.
but they could play with all those bands.
Yes.
And, I love Dan Seeley from King Nine because I've known him since, he was young going to shows. And, I was able to put them on the Biohazard show at Irving, and they smashed. They just smashed it. They're fucking good. So I think like, it's cool that out of the 35 plus year evolution of Long Island hardcore, these bands now are just all turned into something like really special and just pretty incredible.
I'm with you. It's as big as ever. I remember Race, called me a couple of years ago, and we played with Strife, Shutdown, Combust at the time, who were blowing up. I know they're not
Yeah,
Long Island,
yeah.
they're blowing up
Yeah.
right now, and Soldiers, and he's like, and I was going here and there to shows, but Race was like, oh, it's back now. It's
That's
it's
back.
back, and
Yeah.
everyone's and you could tell, and it's not going away, and that's amazing.
Yeah, what's funny? Every once in a while, I'll see like people post shit like, "Oh, it's not like it was." It's like, yeah, dude, it is like it was. You're just fucking old, And the thing is, like, it's true. It's like as much as I like going to shows, I know that like I'm a guest, like and like anybody in our age group that rolls to one of those shows, like we're a guest in the house of like the newer hardcore kids because like that's who goes to every show, that's who books the shows, that's who's like starting bands. It's like we just show up every once in a while, but they're keeping that shit alive.
Yeah, oh, for sure, they really are. What's another I like? The Stress. I think they're really good.
Oh yeah, they're awesome.
They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
great.
they're
They were
awesome.
great.
Yeah,
The judge show
yeah,
that
the Judge Show. Yeah,
you're
yeah,
at.
they're
Yeah,
cool
they're
too.
really really good. I love what they do. All right, one more here, man, and then we'll end off with that quick rapid fire kind of questions, I guess. So,
Sure.
what advice would you give yourself if you went back in time to talk to Christian at 17 years old? What advice would you give yourself?
You know, it's hard because I do think that everything that I went through was necessary for me to get to where I am. I know that sounds like it should be like a live, laugh, love bullshit thing, like that you get at Home Goods, but I do believe that like everything that like you go through is kind of leads you where you're supposed to where you're supposed to be, right? I will say that if I can give a 17-year-old that's not Christian McKnight any advice, it would be like learn from everything, like try everything, because you never know where you're going to wind up. If you think that you have it all figured out at 17 when you pick your major at college, you might wind up going to college and you might fucking hate it. Um, don't get that neck tattoo when you're 17. That's I didn't get neck tattoos till I was in my 40s, but I mean, fuck it. If you do, free will, right? Like
Right,
I
right.
believe in free will. But no, I would tell like anybody, you know, that the path that you might go down is a path that you might not see yet. Because I didn't know that you could be a full-time show promoter when I was 17. I never thought of that. You know what I mean? Like I never thought this would be my career. And that career kind of like presented itself as I got older. So I think that like, you just got to keep yourself open. But, and all the, man, I can't talk about this enough. All these people from Long Island that obviously they're like more hardcore adjacent, but Dan Nigro from As Tall as Lions, Matthew Coma, my buddy Justin Raisin, these guys are like the biggest producer songwriters in the world. And they all came from our scene. And sorry, like the more emo adjacency, but they were people in bands. I'm sure none of them ever thought they were going to be songwriters slash producers. They learned how to, and they played songs and now look at them. So I do think like if I could give any advice to a younger person, that advice is always um keep your options open because you never know where you're gonna wind up and like what you're gonna fall into.
Sure, man.
Because the million things especially music, like who there's so many things that you can wind up doing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All right, man. So we'll end off with summer questions. So and summer, you choose between two, and just go with first thing comes to mind.
Okay.
I guess this means for today. So favorite venue to set up a show.
Urban Plaza. I mean, I can't say enough about it. I grew up going there. It's amazing that I get to these shows there, and it's still one of the best venues in New York City. It's had some of the most legendary people there. People want to play there. It's the best.
I agree. It's an awesome place. Promoting or performing.
Promoting all the way. I mean, you get it too because you retired for a while. Like, I mean that moment is amazing, and hopefully I get to do it once or twice more before I'm dead. But promoting for sure.
Yeah, we will. I'm going to pull you out of it and pull you on the show with us at one point.
All right.
If you had to revive one hardcore band to play a show, who would that be?
Um, wow, that's a tough one. I would love to see Scapegrace. I would love to see just talking Long Island bands. I'd love to see Scapegrace. I'd love to see fucking Grid. Oh my God. That fucking
They're
Grid
great.
demo.
Yeah,
Grid. I fucking love them. That's the first thing I would kind of think of. Uh yeah, just because I mean I think about those bands all the time and how fucking great they were and yeah. Scapegrace. Jesus Christ. No, yeah, I can't even. I'm just making noises because it gets me so worked up thinking
so
of how
that
good
yeah,
Scapegrace is. Yeah,
Life of a Spectator or based on a true story.
a Life of Spectator, not even
Yeah.
close,
hmm Grime or Monster with Eyes of a Boy.
dude. You can't even compare. Monster was like a real record. I knew how to sing. We had like a better producer. Like Monster. It sucks that we broke up before Monster came out. And I'm glad it got on Spotify last year, and the people that have heard it were like, "Holy shit!" It's like
Yeah,
night and day.
yeah. Texas is the reason or the Get Up Kids?
Get 'em kids. I mean, I love Texas, but I have a relationship with the Get 'em kids. I've booked both, but Get 'em kids are just like I don't know if you know this. Cleanser played with the Get 'em kids in Europe, and that's how like we literally played Cleanser.
Oh,
This
I
is true
didn't know
story.
that. I didn't know you played with them in
Cleanser,
Europe.
Cleanser, Arkham, Chemical, the band that we were on tour with, Braid and Ghetto Kids played Lint Fabrique in Belgium on Valentine's Day in 1994, and that's how I met the Ghetto Kids. They were Dean Dubin.
Oh,
I just
wow.
like they're just yeah. I mean Texas totally important. Ghetto Kids is amazing.
By the time this comes out, it should be the day after I will be seeing them at Mulcahy's. So I'm looking forward to that show to see them.
Cool.
Heavy hardcore or melodic hardcore?
Depends on the mood, man.
Right.
Like I think that we're all what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. We're never in the same. We're moody people, Like things change. It can never be the same thing, I don't know. Like people that I hang out with will be like, dude, it's 10 in the morning. How are you listening to something heavy? You might just be in the mood for something heavy at 10
Right.
o'clock, or So I mean, I don't know. I think it changes, but
You're
yeah,
right.
it's a
And
shame.
it's funny as I read the question to you, I'm thinking too, and as you answered it, like right now, I'm all into I'm into the Get Up Kids. I'm listening to Texas, the Reese
Sure.
Field. I'm listening to that stuff, Mineral, and the Menzingers, even though I wouldn't put them with that. But my point is, it's not heavy.
Influenced by that stuff though, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Uh, Now you posted something that I found super interesting on Facebook. So, top three most influential Long Island hardcore bands.
Ugh. It's so funny because I never gave my opinion when I posted it because I was doing those like Facebook or Instagram polls for a while when I was trying to get everyone to speak, but I never. All right, are you just talking about hardcore? If we're just talking about hardcore and not like the
Yeah.
emo-esque scene, I mean, three, it's like, immediately what comes to mind is Some Majority Neglect and Mind Over Matter.
Mhm.
But because any band that you think of after that fact were some way influenced by those bands. You know what I mean? Like there's like, you mention Neglect and you can mention, like all the bands that they influenced. Mind Over Matter, all the bands that they've even Some Majority was influenced obviously by Mind Over Matter. But so I don't know, it's but those clearly it's those three bands.
In no order, the right. What did you listen to last?
I somebody turned me on to this fucking insane band from the UK called University that
Mhm.
I've been like listening to nonstop. Also, there's a band from Long Island that is again just shows the diversity of Long Island our scene. This band Atomic Life, who is
Mhm.
Billy from Dillinger, Cody from Glassjaw, this incredible singer, and our dude Mike Sadis. It's dude. They're like the shit. It's like
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeahs meets garbage, meets like I don't know. It's really fucking good.
Okay.
And I
Good to
listened
know.
to those two today.
Prefer vinyl or digital?
I'm not a vinyl guy, never been.
Mhm.
I'm a digital person all the way. I collect a lot of shit. I've never collected vinyl.
Yeah, I have a few. I don't have a lot. Like if Anthony
Yeah,
Grace, if I asked him that, I think
I
we'd be Anthony
know.
Grace's answer.
I
So,
know.
three favorite albums, and I know that, and probably after this you're going to miss but it doesn't have to be hardcore.
I mean, I was always used to have the conversation of like perfect records, right? Especially when records were written and not sequenced, and I mean, man, uh, God, Jesus Christ. I mean, I wish I could answer this a lot quicker because I ask people this question all the time. Okay, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say the second Sunny Day Real Estate record, LP2. I'm gonna say, uh, dude, I'm gonna say, jeez, I'm like so thinking in the hardcore vein. I mean, oh, shit, I don't know, like that's so hard. Okay, um, oh, I mean, I think one of the best records of all time is Motley Crue Too Fast for Love. Definitely the best, like,
Yeah, it's a good one.
debut record of any hardcore band. And I would say, if you threw a hip hop record in there, I would say either uh, like 3 Feet High and Rising. I think is a perfect record by De La Soul. I think It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, a Public Enemy. I think Tropical Quest, like Midnight Marauders, or even the first record with the ridiculously long title. Like those are just like, I mean, perfect records.
It's awesome, man. You have three kind of totally different aspects of music with that as well. All right, here's another Matt Rushmore of hardcore. So you got
Of
four, I guess.
hardcore,
Yeah,
of like hardcore of all time.
hardcore, hard.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I would think that. I mean, Bad Brains is definitely up there. I would say I get so much shit because I don't listen to Black Flag or like Black Flag as much as I probably should. Um, but I would, man, I think the representatives, I would say, Bad Brains, Agnostic Front, Youth of Today. I mean, Youth of Today just brought such a different spirit to hardcore, and I just, man, watching them is just incredible. And I mean, Minor Threat. Like, there's no hardcore. There's no Minor Threat.
I agreed. Scratch the surface or built to last.
Scratch the surface. Holy shit. That's a
Um,
dude, that's a fucking
that's my
perfect.
Mount Rushmore of hardcore
That's
albums. Me.
another one too,
Mhm.
like where you listen to that record and there's like very few skips on that record. Like when you listen to it, you're just like, holy shit.
Albums, yeah, it's awesome. Wetlands or Coney Island High?
Wetlands, all day long. Wetlands was just Coney Island High was great. I mean, obviously you had the vibe of St. Mark's when you're in Coney Island High because just the punks are hanging out, squatters are hanging out. Someone's trying to sell you weed, someone's trying to sell you fake ID. It's just a scene. But Wetlands, just the configuration of that venue, like how it was just so weirdly set up, where like you would walk into the room, the stage is kind of on the side, you would have to walk around it, but because of that, it made for like great hardcore shows. I mean,
Yeah, like, is it wrong for me to say I actually enjoyed going to Wetland shows and and playing at Wetlands more than I did CB. I love CB. CB's is CB's, obviously,
Did
but
you play? Did you play all three? Did you play
we played all
CBs?
three. Yeah, a bunch
So
of times.
yes, I,
You
I, I
know,
was I was lucky enough to do all three too.
yeah,
I'll tell you this. I liked playing Coney Island High more because I remember playing Coney Island High like it just kind of like looked cooler, like looking out and just the way it was. But Wetlands, as far as like that's a place I never booked a show, and I wish it was still around because that's a place I really wish I could have booked a show at.
yeah. When that place went, I was like, oh, Long Island Zoo or Deja One.
Man, Deja One. I think Deja One was just again, it was as much as I liked the Long Island Zoo, Deja One was just a fantastic vibe. Everybody came. They had ska shows there that Gary Henderson of what's his name of Edna's Goldfish book. There was just Deja One was awesome.
It
Like
was
Deja
packed
One,
almost every. It was every weekend. There was kids
1,500
there.
people.
It was amazing. It was amazing. So we have to talk about our Mets here a little bit. So
Okay, sure.
your favorite current Mets player?
Um, it's such a hot topic issue because of all the stuff going on with Pete.
Hmm.
Pete would definitely be up there just because I like his grit. But I don't know, man. Like, how do you not love Iglesias last year?
Yeah.
Like just what he brought to the team. Did you see what the fuck's it? Nick, I can't remember his name. Nick Castellanos is his name on the Phillies talking about how he
Yeah,
thought
he
that
said
like
he should be the
the,
MVP.
the MVP, yeah. Which he in some regards because
Yeah, there's some truth. I see.
because obviously, like, if you're just looking at stats, Otani's Otani, right? But if you're looking at somebody who like revitalized the team, made an anthem, a theme song, like like just changed the whole dynamic of the Mets, it's definitely Iglesias.
Agreed. Agreed. Without that, I don't know if what they did last year happens. Actually, So yeah,
Dude, I say that all the time. I think he's the fucking man. I think
yeah.
he's
Like it was May
absolutely the man.
1st. I'm like, it's great. Season's over. I was like kind of
Right.
thing. And then they
They lost the
just
first 5 games.
oh, it was rough. Mets off season. This off season right now. Now I know they're not done yet. They just they picked up some relievers here, so I actually love their bullpen. I'm always complaining to you about them what they do, but I'm actually very happy
Sure.
with the bullpen. Uh, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, what do you give their off season so far?
Um, Listen, I have a group that I started a bunch of years ago with. Are you in it? The
Uh,
Mets group?
is it in Facebook? No, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Okay, I'll add you.
Cool.
It's basically like all people that goes to hardcore
Oh,
shows.
okay.
Um, like it's all people that go to the hardcore shows that are also Mets fans. Um, I'll say this. Obviously, the Soto acquisition is huge. They got to sign fucking Pete. I mean, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous. This is like, it's. I went on a rant about this the other day. This is what I liken this to, right? When you sign up for a phone company or a cable company and they give you this like amazing introductory rate where the first year you pay like
Yeah.
less than like whatever, but then when you've been there for a while, they totally fuck you and you pay a bunch of money. That's what's happening to Pete, where it's like, where like if whatever, if like if he was like on another team, the Mets would offer him much more money than paying him
Right.
to stay. And I understand his frustration. And I think it's like, I mean, I know this isn't a Mets podcast, but I think it's like, yo, fucking pay the guy. And the other thing somebody brought up recently too, and like it's so true. He's like, as a Mets fan, we've seen so many classic players leave because of contract bullshit.
Oh yeah,
Whether it's like,
Strawberry, Reyes. I mean, I was young, but Seaver. I mean, they all. Well, Seaver was
yeah,
traded, but still, You see
No,
people
but
go.
but the amount of people that went that like they just and then eventually became stars like Justin Turner, Carlos Gomez, like that stars in other places. We're just like, dude, these are our dudes, and it's like I think in regards to Pete, um, listen, if you're Pete and you see your team pay that much money for Soto, right? So you're like, they're willing to pay it, and they offer you a contract that is essentially 3 years of half of what they're paying him per year. You're offended, and I understand that. And it's like, I don't know, fucking sign him already. Gee, get it done.
By the time this comes out, I'm hoping it's looking a little promising with some of the news today. I'm hoping by the time this comes out, we can look back and laugh at this conversation, and he's there.
I
They
hope
need him,
so
they
because
need him clean. They need him batting cleanup because they
he's a
need him going
franchise
into the
player,
void.
man. Like Soto's here, but Soto's not going to carry the team. And you know what? Soto's not on the Yankees last year. I still think they get to the World Series. So like, I'm psyched we have him, but I mean, we need Pete.
Agreed. Christian, thanks, man. This was an awesome conversation and
Thank
about
you.
shows and going down memory lane a little bit, but also talking about, obviously the scene, how it is today. But appreciate it. Hang tight. I'm going to just wrap up here
Cool, no problem.
and then we'll end it off. Thank you for listening to the What Lies Ahead podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. For more information on future episodes, you can go to my Instagram account and follow us at the What Lies Ahead _podcast and on Facebook by searching What Lies Ahead podcast. See you all on the next episode.